We'll start with Dan McDonald's story on the back of the Irish Independent this morning. PFAI slams insulting plan for 300 grand wage crisis fund. So yesterday evening, a statement popped into the inboxes of the Irish football media, and it said that the FAI come up with a plan to build an account basically with 300 grand in it, and it'd be an emergency fund. All insurance, all countries in the world tend to have an insurance levy where if you're in a car accident and the person that crashes into you isn't insured, this levy pays the insurance, and so you're not at a loss for it. This is kind of a similar type of fund where if a League of Ireland club who has a licence granted by the FAI somehow finds himself in financial difficulties, can't afford to pay the wages of their players, as a matter of last resort, there will be a fund of 300 grand there to pay the players' wages. And there will be repercussions for any club who uses it. So you won't be able to sign players, you might have points deducted. It seems like it's not the worst idea of all time, although hopefully you don't actually need it. But in the middle of the statement was a sentence that the FAI have contacted the PFAI through SIP2 to say that they want the PFAI to pay half of the 300 grand. So 150 grand from the FAI, 150 grand from the PFAI, the Players Association, the union basically. The PFAI claimed that they hadn't heard about this until it actually was published in the press release that went out from the FAI. And they also, in their statement, fought back saying John Delaney earns more than this in a single year, and the FAI have a multi-million euro turnover. We have a staff of 3. Why would the players be expected to pay their own wages? It was an astonishing statement from the PFAI in terms of like, here's the knife and we're going to twist it. And they were pretty astonished that the FAI went public with this offer before it had been agreed or before it had been discussed properly. They hadn't actually met about it. They hadn't had a meeting before the FAI put this out.
No, the FAI do say that in the statement, that we await the response from the PFAI. Like, you would question why you would put out a statement if you're still awaiting a response, given the other party involved is paying 50% of the proposed fund here, which is, as you say, players paying their own wages, because that's where quite a bit of the money from the PFAI comes from. So we're going to have Stephen McGuinness on in a little while to give us a little bit more detail on the PFAI response to this. I'm interested in, for example, things like how often does he meet John Delaney? Like, he says he hasn't met him in quite a while. Is it up to John Delaney? Is it up to somebody else to try and take ownership of this situation? I'm not quite sure. It's a very interesting political question right now. I mean, there is obviously an umbrella, and beneath that umbrella is the PFAI, and they're not happy with the umbrella above them, and rightly so. I think it's if we can take both statements at face value, then it's ill-timed, really, just bringing out that statement so early. Maybe just waiting for a response from the PFAI might have been the best course of action. Yeah,
or saying that we have a bunch of proposals. One of these proposals would be that we have this fund. Who pays into that fund will be decided in discussions with the PFAI. We'd like them to make a contribution. But it's certainly, everybody's on a war footing now as opposed to actually talking to each other properly. So there's the tweet from Stuart Kilhooley. Extraordinary behaviour by the FAI. If they had a proposal, all they had to do was knock on the PFAI door in Abbottstown rather than trial run this ludicrous half and half suggestion in the media. The idea of the players paying their own wages is astonishing. So you can see his Twitter handle is @PFAI Solicitor. The total fund proposed is less than the annual salary of the Chief Executive of the FAI. Hell of a statement from the PFAI in response to the FAI's proposal of a 300 grand fund, half funded by the PFAI for players with wage issues. Total fund proposal is less than the annual salary of the FAI Chief Executive, deeply insulting the players, all of whom earn a tiny percent of his income, should be expected to contribute to a fund to pay their own wages. So just one of many zingers, according to Mark McCadden, in the statement. So you can check out those statements. And then the big breaking news in hurling is that, well, it's not really breaking news just yet, it's a breaking concern. Seamus Harnedy has a hamstring injury, and you have to assume, unless his hamstring is ripped off the bone, he's going to start at least at the weekend. But whether or not he is in any difficulty of being hampered by that injury, I mean, that would move the needle, I think, relatively significantly if he is hampered. But if he's okay to play and can at least, I don't know, cut and break into sprints they're going to get him out there and make sure that he has an opportunity to contribute.
Well, it is a question as old as time. Like, do you start this player when they're half fit, or do you leave him on the bench when they're half fit? It comes back to the Mo Salah equation in the World Cup.
Got to start.
Granted, the thing is, Mo Salah was absolutely everything to Cork's hopes. Like, Seamus Harnedy can look around and he sees Conor Lehan and he sees Patrick Horgan in the dressing room with him, and John Myler recognises that as well. Like, they have other threats. If he's not 100% fit, there's no point risking him until later on in the occasion, because, as you say, if he's not able to go into a full sprint, then what's the point? But he has such an outrageous level of talent that having him on the pitch in the 60th, 65th minute, when all he needs to do is maybe grab a ball and from a tight angle or somewhere, like, produce some sort of clutch moment, then that's potentially where they need him more than in the first 20 minutes where the intensity can be incredibly high. And if you're a little bit injured, like, it's going to backfire, really, is how we've seen these occasions unfold in the past.
So the Cork hurlers at the front of the Examiner this morning, same hymn sheet. Cork no longer panic and abandon the game plan, says Christopher Joyce. I mean, that was definitely the thing that you would have associated with Cork, basically, even including the year that they reached the All-Ireland final, is that they were a team who had come from, particularly in the noughties, a tradition of everybody knowing exactly what their role was, to a team which suddenly looked like a bunch of luxuriously gifted individuals, all of whom was capable of doing damage to their direct opponent, but never quite reached the sum of their parts, and certainly never exceeded the sum of their parts. Tommy Martin fears neuroscience will destroy the spirit of sport, so we'll get into that mind games issue a little bit later on. And then Eamon Dunphy's on the top of the Examiner. Love him or loathe him, you could never ignore Dunphy on RTE. That's Brendan O'Brien's piece, and his point is that his greatest trick, and the headline was saying, was staying relevant. I actually disagree. I think that over the last half decade or so, maybe over most of the last decade, it was actually pretty easy to ignore Dunphy at that point, when proper analysis started to come in from people who had played the game recently and could use the technology and could explain what it was like in a modern dressing room in a Champions League game. Then all of a sudden you could easily flick over and watch, because Dunphy's shtick was shtick as opposed to anything other than Punch and Judy stuff. And when people started offering a realistic alternative on the UK channels in particular, it was fairly easy, I would argue, to ignore Dunphy at that point.
Yeah, like, just because it was shtick doesn't mean that it's enjoyable. It doesn't mean it's not enjoyable shtick, or that there is a huge market for that, and potentially an even bigger market than there is for serious analysis. Like, I agree with Brendan O'Brien there that Dunphy has remained relevant. He up until this point, I completely
over
believe
the
that.
last 5-6 years, you would sit down and happily go, oh, I really need to see what he's going to say.
Different point. Do I happily sit down and watch him? Well, maybe I do to a certain extent. You know, I'm always interested to hear what's he going to come out with next, sort of thing, rather than saying I'm going to learn something. I never thought that. But is there a point where, and, you know, forgive me if I'm completely off the mark here, is there a point where very serious analysis has reached saturation point just purely due to the fact of being familiar with Sky every single weekend and how excellent their analysis is the hour before a game on a Monday, whenever Monday Night Football is on?
Yeah, totally. There's definitely a saturation point in that.
Like, I can't believe I'm about to use this, but did Dunphy become almost a breath of fresh air?
No. I don't think so. At what point is this?
When
recently, when like he didn't have a clue about who was playing,
see, I've
names of the players, their track record and careers, you know, not having actually watched any of the football.
Breath of fresh air is probably not the correct term, but certainly his niche that was carved out when he started became more of a niche later on, because you look at all the new pundits that came into the RTE panel, the likes of the Duffs, the Sadlers, the Keith Andrews, all excellent pundits, all very well tuned into the game. You would learn something from listening to these guys speak for even 2.5 minutes. Whereas from this other source at the other end of the panel was kind of an explosion of who knows what.
But it wasn't. Like, it was, for occasionally it was, and particularly around Saipan, right? But after that, it just became this caricature. It just became predictable and actually boring. It was the same shtick again and again and again. And look, there's a comfort in that. It's like a comfortable pair of slippers. Here he goes off on one about Ronaldo, or whoever is the new Ronaldo in that he's decided to beat up, and it's like, okay, and like Brian Kerr or Dunphy as a pundit, give me Brian Kerr all day long and twice on Sundays, because Kerr has a lyricism, has been in the arena, has done it, has failed at that, has come back and has been an absolutely brilliant pundit, and does all the work that you would expect somebody who's getting paid to watch and analyse football is supposed to do, but also has that sense of, I understand exactly what the people at home are thinking and watching. With Dunphy, it just became a showbiz, baby, and that was it. Like, and that's fair enough. If a lot of people really like that. Like, a lot of casual sports fans are like, "Ooh, I wonder what he's going to say this time," even though you know exactly what he's going to say. And it's like one of those comedians going on the tour. Like the second or third time they're doing the same jokes, the laughs get bigger because people are anticipating them. But inside, their soul must be dying a little bit from telling the same joke again and again and again and again and again and again.
Well, I would like, maybe I am only just a casual sport fan whose soul is held up a little bit stronger than everybody else's. I guess I have this sepia-tinted view of punditry in the early part of the century being Eamon Dunphy's everywhere, whereas the world has woken up to the point where we need to learn things from television. People pay good money for the likes of packages from Sky Sports and BT, and they expect to get something in return. And the one remnant of the good old days of saying what you like was Eamon Dunphy. Maybe I'm getting wistful and nostalgic, and maybe looking back on a career that doesn't deserve to be looked back on, a punditry career that doesn't deserve to be looked back on. With
so there was a time when there was a time when he was absolutely brilliant. There was a time when he was important and excellent and was exactly the perfect foil to Giles, who knew exactly what the truth was about the football that we were watching. But Dunphy's time was the mid-noughties. Like, that was when he was really good and still relevant. After that, like, if anybody can point me in the direction of some brilliant punditry from Dunphy in the last decade, then hit me up on Twitter.
Well, I'm certainly not making that case. I'm certainly not making the case that I sat down there and I was like, that was really thoughtful, well thought out point there.
Or I found it unbelievably entertaining. He brought something massive, and like, which was the whole point for tuning in at this point was like the entertainment.
I like, unbelievably entertaining might be a stretch, but entertaining, sure.
Not just kind of bland old, same old shit that I've seen from this shtick. I've seen this movie a million times.
Maybe you've got a higher threshold for the mundane than you do, Ger, but I certainly found him relatively entertaining this World Cup.
I found, all right, okay. Well.
Like, he did come at number 5 on Nathan Murphy's punditry power rankings, and he is our football correspondent.
Well,
so.
I guess the point was that I had flicked off ages ago, so didn't actually watch that much of Dunphy in this World Cup, because it was like, I had enough. Walsh and Monaghan, slightly bloodied but still unbowed. There's a good focus on the football, which is interesting. It's not football this weekend, obviously, in the front of the sports section.
It's weird how that wasn't embargoed until next week, actually. All the papers are going with Colin Walsh today. He was really good by all accounts. Maura Trass is going to be her piece with Colin Walsh will be coming up a little bit later on. But yeah, it's obviously hurling left, right and centre all this weekend. Plenty of inches next week for the football.
News from the UK that the Rugby Football Union are going to trial lowering the tackle to under the armpits in rugby in a bid to halt the concussion crisis that they have. Dan Martin was second on the stage yesterday, so he gets a mention as well. Now, here's the back of the Times Ireland edition. You might not be able to read that, I'm a bit far away there, but it's Delaney can afford to pay for a new fund, which is essentially what the PFA are saying. You earn 300 grand a year. 300 grand is a nice round figure that is being proposed for this fund. It's a funny parallel there. It almost would have been better if they'd been like 250 or 400. Which is not kind of as... Delaney earns in the region of 350 grand per year, with an additional 100 grand coming from UEFA after he was voted onto the executive committee last year. This is Gary Doyle, the chief sports writer. It's funny timing as well from the FAI to release the statement, because today the annual accounts are coming out and there will be a press briefing. So it's overshadowed that, which presumably has some good news for the FAI. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been having the press briefing.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's true. Like, there has been talk about, will the press briefing still happen this morning? I'd be surprised if it didn't, to be honest. Like the last time there was a big press briefing, obviously in the Aviva a couple of months ago, there was no shying away from the press on that occasion. No. So it'll be interesting to see what they have to say. There usually is a facing up to the questions. Whether or not the answers are satisfactory or not is an entirely different story. But yeah, the optics of the 300 grand thing, all right, is a strange one, but and also the timing is a bit odd. But I guess I had to act with time in mind.
Two quick stories from the Times as well. Mourinho fury after Martial abandons tour. Anthony Martial is going to be with the prospective mother of his girlfriend's pregnant and she's having a baby, and he's gone because the baby is expected anytime now. Apparently Jose Mourinho's pissed off with this. Well, I'm sorry, but your shitty tour of the States is not quite comparable with the birth of a child. It just isn't. But Mourinho's like, nah, can't be doing that. You can't be leaving us. You're a professional footballer now. Kids don't matter. And then United make up transfer strategy as they go along. Is the headline. Oliver Kay has like 800 words, which are worth reading, but the headline, for once, reaches the point, and it's totally true.
Who does Jose Mourinho hate most? Is it Anthony Martial? Is it Luke Shaw? Is it Paul Pogba? Like, who does Jose Mourinho throw his darts at in the morning?
Luke Shaw, I would say. Yeah.
But Luke Shaw...
Martial at least occasionally...
But in Jose Mourinho's weird world, he feels betrayed by Anthony Martial for having the temerity to go and see his son or daughter being born. I genuinely believe that Jose Mourinho might actually be feeling offended by this, which sums up the extent to which the man has lost it. He's just living in a world of chaos right now, where he is lighting fire to every potential flammable object he sees. And this Anthony Martial thing, it's almost like he's using the birth of his child as an excuse to kind of either further push him out the door or further preach to Ed Woodward that all the players are abandoning him and are jumping ship, including leaving a very important match in California to go see his own child being born. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, makes
it's
no
absolutely
sense.
It's lunacy at this point. I'm struggling to see what the end result of this could be in a positive manner. Does Jose Mourinho look around and say, I've got nothing left but the media? I just feel like I should create some sort of grim representation of my character, and maybe he gets some sort of perverse enjoyment out of that.
I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. The career arc at the moment just doesn't make any sense.
He's
sense. Clearly a very smart, calculating individual, and yet pre-season, I don't know, maybe the team starts the season really well and plays really well in the first 6 or 8 games and everybody forgets about all this stuff, but it seems like the war thing has already started, and normally you have to wait a couple of weeks for the war thing to pick up. But anyway, the Irish news very briefly, which is going to be quite far away. Jumping for boys, that's from Parkhead last night, a 3-1 win for Celtic against Rosenborg. That's the main story there. And Poacher, I'd consider down job, but County must modernise. Interesting tactics, applying for a job at the county board and telling them that get your shit together, lads.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work.
No, utilising the media as well to do so is an interesting one. I'm not actually sure where those quotes came from. I presume it was an exclusive.
The Wrestling Post has some dart stuff on the back.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Top class sport.
Punter's eye expert to take Sussex by storm. So Andrea Azzeni has been called up to replace Frankie Dettori on without parole in the Group 1 Qatar Sussex Stakes. But by the time the acceptors are released today, he may no longer be the big race favourite. So they think expert is going to go off favourite in that one.
The back page of the Irish Daily Mail is Leo weighs in. Now, Taoiseach takes a swipe at GAA over Miller, so Leo Varadkar has weighed in on the Liam Miller tribute match situation. One thing I would like to point out, because I think it's important, is that Páirc Uí Chaoimh is a wonderful facility, said Mr Varadkar, but it is there with the help of €30 million of taxpayers' money, and those are taxpayers who play all forms of sport and none, the Taoiseach told reporters yesterday. Mourinho then is left fuming as Martial flies home, and you've got wacky races there as well. Chris Froome getting hauled off his bike and getting stopped down a Pyrenean hill yesterday after that stage. Dubs draw, shorts draw then at the back of the Herald. 6-day turnaround for Gavin's squad. So it was confirmed yesterday that Dublin against Galway, Monaghan or Kerry will take place in Croke Park on the Saturday. That's going to be Saturday 2 weeks at 5 o'clock. Dublin, of course, played a previous week on the Sunday, so they will definitely be the only team with a 6-day turnaround because they've confirmed top spot. Second place in Group 2 will be playing on the Sunday. The back page of Irish Daily Star says, more misery. United boss hit by new Perisic snub. So Jose Mourinho says Jeremy Cross in Los Angeles has suffered more transfer misery with another snub from Ivan Perisic, and it reminded me here of the story where Jose tried to get Perisic before. He failed in a bid to land him last September when the former Club Brugge and Borussia Dortmund winger chose to sign a new 5-year deal instead of joining Manchester United. That came about after Ed Woodward refused to shell out an extra €3.3 million to meet Inter's €43 million asking price. Now, as much as we like to bait into Jose Mourinho in the morning, €3.3 million to go from 40 to 43 million euro, you're giving that money if you're Ed Woodward. You're not giving Jose Mourinho an excuse to attack you.
Isn't Ed Woodward the guy who paid more for Marouane Fellaini when they waited to sign him at the end of the summer? There was a buyout clause that they missed the deadline for, and then they paid more than that buyout clause just a couple of weeks later.
Yeah, that was
Ed Woodward, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure it was. It would have been in his tenure. That was his work of art, really.
I mean, that was definitely a good sign that this might not be working out so well at the moment.
It's not, like, you can't afford to be frugal, particularly when you're dealing with Jose Mourinho, because he'll cling on to any little bit of a chink in the armour that you show.
They can afford it. Those transfer fees, they all get written off over a period of time. At Man United, the accountants know what they're doing, even if the people buying and doing the signing of the footballers don't always.
Yeah, I'd say on Jose Mourinho's bedroom wall, he's got written Anthony Martial, traitor, Ed Woodward, stingy, and I don't know what he's got written about the likes of Luke Shaw and Paul Pogba at the moment. The back page of the Mirror this morning is Harry in a hurry. United in £65 million approach for Fox's defender, and the World Cup star believes he'll kick off season at Old Trafford against Leicester. False to God. We did it in 2016, let's do it again. That's Stephen Kenny talking ahead of Dundalk against Larnaca. That kicks off at 7:45 this evening. The back page of The Sun is hurry up and do a deal. Jose tells Ed to splash £60 million and Pep to build Barca-style City dynasty. He aims to now stay at Manchester City for a few years. And
hang on a second. That's not what we heard yesterday.
Pretty sure 24 hours ago we were talking about Pep Guardiola getting bored of winning. So this is an interesting development in the Pep Guardiola.
The silly season is upon us in full-throated voice.
Manchester United played AC Milan this morning and they won 9-8 in penalties.
Right, great. Quality.
Tried to get it on in the office, but...
it's on in UCLA.
MUTV.
Right.
Would it be a UCLA that late?
There's that. I don't know.
Anyway.
That's where Anthony Martial is flying back from.
Oh yeah, good point. Back page of The Guardian is over to you, Geraint. Froome concedes tour with pledge to look after Thomas. 1 minute 59 seconds is Geraint Thomas's lead over Dumoulin. And no doubting Thomas, Welshman extends lead to close in on title as rival Froome cracks in another day of sensational drama at the Tour de France.